There is a country in the Middle East that has an open embassy in Iran and an open embassy in Israel and an open line to Washington simultaneously. While its neighbors wage wars, break alliances, and redraw borders, this country keeps its doors open to all of them. No one asks how it survives. Perhaps that is the first question we should have asked. Oman. It sits at the southeastern tip of the Arabian Peninsula, a country the size of Italy, shaped by the sea on 3 sides and the desert on the 4th. Most maps reduce it to a narrow strip beside Saudi Arabia. That is not a map of Oman. That is a failure of attention. The mountains here are older than most nations. The trade routes that crossed this land were already ancient when Rome was still a village on a hill. Something was being built here long before anyone thought to write it down. This is not a documentary about a country most people know. It is a documentary about a country most people have been looking at without seeing. Oman is not quiet by accident. It is not neutral by default. What looks like restraint is, in fact, the product of 3,000 years of deliberate thought. To understand it, we need to go back, far back, to a tree that changed the ancient world. Musandam, a sliver of Omani territory that juts into the Strait of Hormuz like a question mark pressed against the world's most sensitive waterway. 20% of the world's oil passes through that strait. And Oman watches it from above. Not threateningly. Not possessively. Simply watchfully. The geography gave Oman leverage before Oman knew what to do with it. The Al-Hajar Mountains run the length of the country's spine, a wall of limestone and ancient seabed thrust upward by continental collision. They divide coastal Oman from interior Oman as cleanly as a knife. The coast faces outward, toward India, toward Persia, toward East Africa. The interior faces inward, toward silence, toward stone, toward the Ibadi faith that took root here and nowhere else. A country of 2 temperaments, divided by rock, unified by something harder to name. To the southwest, the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, presses against Oman's border like a slow tide of sand. There is no negotiating with that desert. You simply accept its terms. And to the east, the Arabian Sea, open, generous, indifferent. The sea that carried Omani ships to Zanzibar, to Goa, to the coasts of Persia and beyond. Squeezed between the desert and the ocean, Oman had only one viable strategy. It chose trade over conquest. And that choice made thousands of years ago is still visible in the way it behaves today. In the far south, beyond the mountains and the desert, Dhofar receives the monsoon. Every summer, the same winds that built the ancient world, the Kharif, turn this corner of Arabia impossibly green. Grass on the dunes, waterfalls in the desert, frankincense trees sweating resin onto limestone outcrops, as they have done for 4,000 years. This was not simply a landscape. This was the source of the ancient world's most coveted substance, and Oman knew what that meant. Long before the first mosque rose on Arabian soil, Dhofar was already the center of something enormous. The frankincense tree, Boswellia sacra, grew here and almost nowhere else. Its resin was worth more than gold in the markets of Babylon, Egypt, and Rome. It was burned in temples, used in medicine, traded across 3 continents. And the people who controlled its harvest, the people of southern Oman, controlled a trade network that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Indus Valley. They did not need armies. They had something everyone wanted. The Omani mastery of the sea began not in the modern era, but in antiquity. The same monsoon winds that bring rain to Salalah in summer blow ships reliably southwest toward East Africa and northeast toward India in winter. Omani sailors understood this before the science existed to explain it. They built the dhow, a vessel perfectly calibrated to the Indian Ocean's rhythms, and with it, they built a maritime network that no nation in the region could match. By the 17th century, Oman controlled Zanzibar, Mombasa, Muscat, and the Persian coast simultaneously. Not an empire in the European sense. A network, which is harder to destroy. In 1507, the Portuguese arrived. They wanted control of the sea routes, and they took it by force, burning the port of Muscat to rubble. For over a century, Oman endured occupation. The forts you see today at Muscat, at Mutra, at Nizwa were built partly in response to that century. Each one is a lesson in how a small country survives a large power. not by matching it in force, but by outlasting it. The Portuguese left. The Omanis stayed. The forts remained. The expulsion of the Portuguese in 1650 was the work of the Yaruruba dynasty, and it was followed by something unexpected. Instead of turning inward, Oman expanded. Within decades, Omani fleets had captured Zanzibar and the East African coast, pushing as far south as Mozambique. The empire that emerged was not built on religion or ethnicity. It was built on trade, on tolerance, and on the peculiar Omani instinct for keeping doors open. That instinct, not a policy, but a habit of mind, has never quite left. In the decades after the Prophet's death, the Islamic world split. The question was not theological at first, it was political. Who has the right to lead? One faction said, the Prophet's family by blood. Another said, the community by consensus. A third group, smaller, quieter, eventually forgotten by most of the world, said something different. They said, the leader must be chosen by merit. And if he fails, he can be removed. That third group became the Ibadis. And they found their home, their only enduring home, in Oman. The Ibadi doctrine is built on a concept that sounds simple and proves, in practice, almost impossible. Quietism. The belief that Muslims should not wage offensive war against each other, that political violence between believers is never justified. In a region that has spent 14 centuries fighting over exactly that question, this is not a moderate position. It is a radical one. The Ibadis were not pacifists. They fought when attacked. But they did not build their identity around the sword. They built it around the scholar, the merchant, and the judge. That theological choice made in the 7th century echoes in Omani foreign policy today. For centuries, Nizwa was the capital of the Ibadi Imamate, the spiritual and administrative heart of interior Oman. The Imam was chosen, not born. He governed by the book, not by the sword. The great drum tower of Nizwa fort, rising 30 meters from the valley floor, was not merely a defensive structure. It was a statement. We are here. We have been here for a long time, and we intend to remain on our own terms. The fort still stands. The terms have not changed. The tension between the coastal sultanate, outward-facing, commercial, pragmatic, and the inland imamate, inward-facing, religious, uncompromising, ran through Omani history like a fault line. Two centers of authority. Two visions of what Oman was supposed to be. It was not resolved by conquest. It was resolved, eventually, by exhaustion and by one man who understood both sides. But that story belongs to a later century. For now, the fault line simply deepens. For most of Oman's modern history, the country was effectively two countries. Muscat, the Sultanate, controlled the coast, the ports, the trade, and the foreign relations. Nizwa and the interior, the imamate, controlled the religious law, the agricultural heartland, and the loyalty of the tribes. They coexisted uneasily. Sometimes they fought. Mostly, they maintained a careful, grudging distance like two neighbors who share a wall and have never agreed on where it should stand. What eventually united them was not ideology. It was oil. And a sultan who knew how to spend it. In 1970, Sultan Qaboos bin Said came to power. He was 30 years old. He had been educated at Sandhurst. He had spent years under effective house arrest, imposed by his own father. What he found when he took power was a country with fewer than 10 kilometers of paved road, 3 schools and 1 hospital, and an active Marxist insurgency in Dhofar backed by South Yemen that threatened to consume the entire south of the country. He had oil revenues and a clear vision. He used both with a precision that unsettled people who expected a Gulf monarch to simply spend What followed was called the Nada, the Renaissance. In 50 years, Oman built a modern state from almost nothing. Universities, hospitals, roads, airports, a national army, a foreign ministry, a supreme court. The physical transformation was visible. But the more significant transformation was harder to see. Qaboos did not westernize Oman. He did not Islamicize it. He did something more difficult. He made it stubbornly, unmistakably Omani. No building in Muscat is permitted to exceed the height of the Sultan Qaboos Grand Mosque's minaret. That single rule tells you everything about the philosophy of the Renaissance. The foreign policy that emerged from this period was equally deliberate. Oman joined the Arab League, but kept lines open to Israel. It joined the Gulf Cooperation Council, but refused to join the Saudi-led coalitions against Yemen or Qatar. It maintained diplomatic ties with Iran through the Islamic Revolution, through the Iran-Iraq War, through the sanctions years. It hosted American military bases while maintaining warm relations with Tehran. Every one of these positions was, at some point, described by someone as a contradiction. Oman has never found them contradictory. It has simply called them normal. Muscat does not announce itself. There is no skyline. No tower competing with another tower. No neon canyon of ambition. The city spreads along the coast. Whitewashed curves, the mountains pressing it toward the sea pressing it back toward the mountains. It looks, at first approach, like a city that has chosen modesty. It is not modesty. It is confidence dressed in white. The Sultan Qaboos Grand Mosque was completed in 2001 after 6 years of construction. It holds 20,000 worshippers. The chandelier in the main prayer hall, hand-woven in Iran, weighs 8 tons and contains over 1 million Swarovski crystals. That detail matters not as spectacle, but as signal. The mosque was built with Iranian craftsmanship, Indian marble, British engineering and Omani vision. It is not a statement of Islamic purity. It is a statement of Islamic confidence, one that does not need to exclude in order to define itself. Below the mosque, below the forts, below the new city, Mutra breathes. The old port quarter of Muscat is built for walking, not driving. The corniche curves along the water, lined with frankincense shops and coffee houses. The souk behind it is a dark labyrinth of silver, fabric, and dried lemon. Old Omani men in dishdashas sit outside shops that have been in the same family for 4 generations. They do not hustle. They do not need to. The city has been selling things since before the concept of marketing existed. The rest of Muscat is a study in deliberate restraint. The Opera House opened in 2011, a building of extraordinary ambition, clad entirely in Omani limestone, built for a country that had no opera tradition. It was not built for tourists. It was built as a declaration that a country which had 3 schools in 1970 was, 40 years later, prepared to receive the world's greatest musicians. Muscat does not ask for your approval. It never has. It simply prepares. Two hours inland from Muscat, the road climbs into the Al-Hajar Mountains and the temperature drops 10 degrees. Then the valley opens and Nizwa appears. A city of date palms and minarets cupped in a bowl of bare limestone, with the great drum tower of its fort rising above everything like a full stop at the end of a very long sentence. This is the city the coast never fully absorbed. The city that kept its own laws, its own imam, its own idea of what Arabia should be, long after Muscat had made other arrangements with the world. Every Friday morning, the goat market opens outside the fort walls. It is not a performance for visitors. It is a transaction. Men in white dishdashas hold livestock by the horns, negotiate in low voices, exchange money with the unhurried certainty of people who have been doing this for centuries. The fort watches from above. The same fort where, 300 years ago, the Yaruba imams administered justice, stored the treasury, and planned campaigns against the Portuguese. Now it watches a goat market. This is not decline. This is continuity. Above Nizwa, the road climbs further into Jebel Akhdar, the Green Mountain. At 2,000 meters, the air is cool and damp. Terraced orchards cling to near vertical slopes, pomegranates, apricots, roses grown for their essential oil, watered by ancient phallaj channels cut into the rock centuries before anyone thought to call it irrigation. The villages here have Arabic names that translate as the pleasant place and the safe place. They were named by people who understood that in this landscape, pleasantness and safety were the same thing. The roses bloom in spring. The terraces hold. The water flows. The channel was dug 1,000 years ago and has not been allowed to run dry since. "30 kilometers from Nizwa, the road passes Bala Fort, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A structure so old that parts of its foundations predate Islam. The fort was allowed to deteriorate for decades after Oman's unification, the interior no longer requiring a military stronghold. Then Oman spent 20 years restoring it to its original form. Not for tourism. For the same reason you repair an ancestor's house, because it tells you who you are. In June, Something happens to southern Oman that the rest of Arabia cannot explain. The Kharif arrives, the Indian Ocean monsoon, and Dhofar turns green. Not the pale, struggling green of an irrigated garden. A deep, saturated green that runs from the mountain tops to the cliff edge and drops into the sea. Camels graze on open hillsides. Waterfalls appear where there was dust a month before. The air smells of wet earth and frankincense resin. This is not the Arabia of the imagination. This is the Arabia that the imagination forgot to include. At Al-Moksale, the coast west of Salalah, limestone cliffs drop straight into the Arabian Sea. At certain points, the waves have carved blowholes into the rock, funnels that compress the ocean's energy and shoot columns of white water 30 meters into the air. In the monsoon season, they fire constantly, rhythmically, without tiring. There is something in this image that feels like a summary of Oman itself. A country that absorbs pressure quietly and releases it upward in controlled bursts precisely when the moment requires. Wadi Shab cuts through the eastern Al-Hajar mountains like a wound that refused to close. The walls rise 200 meters on either side, bare limestone, fractured and stacked, and at the bottom, a river runs emerald green. You reach it by boat, crossing a small inlet. Then you walk, sometimes wading chest deep through the water, further into the gorge until the walls close above you and the sky becomes a blue ribbon. At the end, a cave. And inside the cave, a pool of water so still it could be a mirror laid on the floor of the earth. No description of this place survives the place itself. The Wahiba sands do not announce themselves gradually. One moment, you are on a gravel plain. The next, the dunes begin, orange and enormous, perfectly formed, marching toward the horizon in a silence so complete it has texture. At sunrise, the dunes are the color of fire. At midday, they are the color of bone. At dusk, they are the color of something that has no name in any European language, a deep, warm, devastating red. Bedouin families still live here, not as a tourist attraction, as a choice. Jebel Shams, the mountain of the sun, carries on its western flank the deepest canyon in Arabia. Wadi Ghul drops 1,000 meters from the rim to the valley floor. From the edge, you look down onto an abandoned village, Sap Bani Khamis, built into the canyon wall centuries ago, accessible only by a path that most people no longer take. The village is empty now, but the houses still stand, stone walls, mud mortar, doorways open to the wind. Waiting for a population that left and never returned. The canyon does not mourn them. It simply holds their architecture in its walls as it holds everything else that has fallen here. At the northernmost tip of Oman, detached from the rest of the country by a strip of UAE territory, Muscat rises from the sea in walls of grey limestone. The fjords here are not Scandinavian. They are hotter, starker, more severe. Traditional dhow boats called sunbucks navigate between the cliffs, moving between fishing villages that have no road access. The water is a color that belongs to the deep ocean, not the Gulf. And the silence is the silence of geography that has simply not yet been disturbed. Do you dare to stay here a night? The mountain walls close behind you. The sea holds still. There is a principle in Omani foreign policy that is never stated publicly, never enshrined in a doctrine, never announced in a speech. It simply governs. The principle is this: Oman does not take sides in conflicts between Muslim states. It does not take sides in conflicts between states that include Muslim states. It does not, if it can avoid it, take sides at all. What looks like neutrality from the outside is, from the inside, a deeply held conviction, rooted not in geopolitical calculation, but in Ibadi theology. You do not wage war against your brothers. You bring them to the table. The track record is quietly extraordinary. In 1978, Oman provided back-channel communications between Egypt and Israel that helped make Camp David possible. In the 1980s, it maintained diplomatic relations with Iran when every other Gulf state had severed them. In 2013, it hosted the secret talks between the United States and Iran that eventually led to the nuclear agreement of 2015. In 2025, as the negotiations resumed in Muscat, it was once again the room where parties who would not speak to each other in public sat down and spoke. Oman did not broker these agreements for influence. It brokered them because brokering is what it has always done. It is the oldest habit this country has. There are people, analysts, neighbours, critics, who find Oman's position untenable. How can you maintain relations with parties in active conflict? How can you share intelligence with one while hosting the other? How can you call this neutrality rather than complicity? Oman's answer, delivered consistently over 50 years and never loudly, is this: the world needs a room where enemies can talk. someone has to keep it open. We have kept it open. Criticize us when it closes. Sultan Qaboos died in January 2020 after 50 years in power. His cousin, Haytham bin Tariq, succeeded him within hours, a transition so orderly it surprised people who had been predicting instability for years. The new sultan moved quickly. Economic diversification. Vision 2040. A recalibration of the Gulf relationships, warmer with Saudi Arabia, unchanged with Iran, unchanged with Israel. The foreign policy did not change because the foreign policy was never personal. It was structural. It was Ibadi. It was Omani. There is a kind of power that announces itself. It builds towers. It holds parades. It names things after itself. And there is a kind of power that does not. That keeps its skyline low. That names things after the landscape, not the leader. That measures its influence not in kilometers of territory or barrels of oil, but in the number of conflicts it has quietly helped to end. Oman has chosen the second kind. For 3,000 years. The country itself is not modest. The frankincense coast is one of the most dramatic coastlines in the world. The wadis are extraordinary. The forts are formidable. The mosque is immense. But the country does not need you to know this. It is not performing for you. It has other things to do. What Oman offers the traveler and the student of nations is something rare. Evidence that restraint is not weakness. That patience is not passivity. That a country can be deeply, unmistakably itself without explaining itself to anyone. The embassies remain open. The back channels remain active. The table in Muscat, wherever it is set this year, in whatever building, is still available to parties that have no other place to sit together. This is not an accident of geography. It is not a product of wealth. It is the result of a doctrine decided in the 7th century, defended in the 17th, and practiced quietly, consistently, without ceremony, in every century since. The question we began with, how does one country stay open to everyone, has an answer. It decided to. A very long time ago. And it has not yet changed its mind. Oman. The open door. The neutral kingdom. The country that decided, centuries before the word diplomacy existed, that talking was harder than fighting and more valuable and worth protecting. It stands at the edge of the Arabian Sea. The mountains hold it from behind. The sea opens before it. And the door always is open.